I live in the Seattle area and commute to work. And in the mid-1990s, I accidentally discovered how to wipe out a certain kind of traffic jam. I was bored, and this was on 520 going west towards the bridges, where there's always a whole bunch of stop-and-go driving. And I was trying to avoid hitting the brakes by driving at the average speed. So drive slow so a big open spot opens up, and then just before I arrive at the stopped wave of cars, they all take off. And if I got it just right, I'd never have to hit the brakes at all. And one evening, I looked in the rearview mirror and could see all the headlights, and I could see the stop-and-go waves of clots of cars behind me. But in my lane, they were totally uniform, which I guess is pretty obvious in hindsight, that I was eating traffic waves. Everybody behind me has no reason to be doing the stop-and-go driving. So one single car for miles and miles was wiping out all of the stop-and-go driving in a single lane. But I kept trying to do that whenever there was any kind of stop-and-go wave by having a big empty space ahead of my car, and then accidentally discovered another kind of traffic jam that would break up ahead of me sometimes. And of course it didn't always work, but if you have a big empty space and there's a jammed merge zone ahead of you, the jam is often kept alive by a solid row of cars in the through lane who won't let anybody in. They pack themselves together. And then there's cheaters who run down to the end and force their way in, and nobody can really stop them. They'll just wait until they can get in between two people. So the traffic jam is really caused by a fight. There might be just a tiny percentage of cheaters going down to the end and forcing their way in. But if I let them in early, they'll merge ahead of me, and then they're not racing down to the end to get in line and do the big fight. And then there's no reason for the traffic jam, and everybody in the through lane just takes off. So I saw that happen a couple of times and realized single drivers can have huge effects if they behave differently, if you let people ahead of you. But why close up gaps in the first place? Well, sometimes it's to block out the cheaters, but more often it's someone will get ahead of you if you leave a space, and now you're one car length back, and you're a loser. If you have a space ahead of you, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 cars get ahead of you, and now you're slow. Your commute takes longer. But if your commute takes like 40 minutes, one car is like 1 second of your commute. So like if you let 10 cars get ahead of you, your commute is 10 seconds longer. So letting cars ahead of you is insignificant. It's like there isn't any race. You're not going to lose no matter how many cars you let ahead of you. And I was doing this all the time, letting people get in when they had to merge, and found that half the time they leave. They merge past, so they didn't really want my space at all. They just wanted to get through the line of cars that wasn't letting anybody in. And mine was the only hole. Now ahead of you, you see a typical Seattle jam. We're south of the city going on I-5, and there's a left-hand exit to the express lanes. And very often this thing is packed with a mile of stopped cars because nobody can get into the solid packed line. Like, it's not a bank teller line where you can go backwards to get to the end. So if you miss your chance, you can't get into the express lanes. And every once in a while there'll be a cheater that'll force their way in, and that's what stops the whole row of cars. So if my hole is letting people in, and they've been trying to get in this long, long line, and finally they get to my hole, they don't have to cheat. They can go in. And I think even the cheating is caused by the people closing up ranks. Because if I'm driving along and I want to merge into this exit lane, and it's a solid packed wall of cars, well, I see them as idiots. They're all like greedy. They've got theirs, and they're not going to let anybody else in. So then I am justified in cheating. Then I'm getting back at all of the greedy idiots who form the solid wall of cars. But that if I'm in the line, I see anybody who wants in as a cheater. And it's just this idiotic competitive thing where each side thinks the other side is evil, and a fight develops. But just by having the big empty spot ahead of my car from habit, I discovered that this kind of jam often breaks up just because of one driver leaving a big spot. The big spot has other effects, like if you have to merge and you've got a big spot ahead of you, you have a lot of choices of who to get in between. Now, if you have no space ahead, then you only have one chance. Either that, or you have to slow down to drift along to find a slot. Oh! Now here's the jam. I've been letting people in ahead of me here to get in the left-hand exit lane, and I guess I didn't let enough in because here we're stopped. But the reason it stops is because people down at the far end are fighting, and it makes them take turns and brings everything to a halt. So, two kinds of traffic jam that an individual driver can affect hugely, and that's these merging zone jams and the stop-and-go driving, the traffic waves that you can wipe out in your lane. There's a third effect, which is the effect on the driver, that I used to be pushing and pushing and pushing through the traffic-heavy congestion. I was the type A that was going to get like 10 cars ahead on my commute and think that I'd done a big thing when I've only gone 10 seconds faster than everybody else. And now I'm like the Zen warrior that knows how to shatter traffic jams as I approach them. Well, sometimes. But it's completely calm existence. Now I'm the philosopher that's helping everybody around me, rather than the competitor that's screwing everybody and backstabbing right and left to get my 10 feet of traffic a couple of car lengths ahead. It's a totally different life as a commuter when you do it that way.